Master, the young monk asked in desperation, I have been meditating for 10 years, sitting in silence for hours each day, following every technique you've taught me, yet I feel further from enlightenment than when I began. What am I doing wrong? The old master looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries and said something that would shatter everything the young monk believed about spiritual practice. You want to know your problem? You're trying too hard to meditate? Stop meditating completely. The young monk was horrified. But Master, how can I become enlightened without meditation? The master smiled. How can you become what you already are? This conversation actually happened in a Zen monastery, and what followed changed not just one monk's life, but our entire understanding of what spiritual practice really means. The monk's name was Chen, and his story will revolutionize how you think about meditation, effort, and the very nature of awakening itself. Let me take you back to the beginning of Chen's journey. 15 years earlier, he had arrived at the monastery as an eager young man, convinced that enlightenment was something he could earn through dedication and hard work. He had read about the great masters, heard stories of their profound realizations, and was determined to join their ranks. Chen threw himself into meditation with the intensity of a soldier preparing for battle. He rose at 4 a.m. for sitting practice, maintained perfect posture for hours, counted breaths with mathematical precision, watched his thoughts like a hawk watching for prey. He followed every instruction, memorized every sutra, mastered every technique the monastery had to offer. But instead of feeling more peaceful, Chen felt increasingly agitated. Instead of becoming more present, he felt constantly distracted. Instead of approaching enlightenment, he felt like he was moving further away from it with each passing day. The harder he tried to quiet his mind, the louder it became. The more effort he put into being mindful, the more scattered his attention grew. The more seriously he took his spiritual practice, the more frustrated and disconnected he felt. For years, Chen assumed this was normal. Spiritual practice is supposed to be difficult. He told himself, the resistance I'm feeling is just my ego fighting against enlightenment. I need to try harder, practice longer, apply more discipline. So he intensified his efforts. He extended his meditation sessions from 2 hours to 4 hours. He added walking meditation, breathing exercises, and mindfulness practices throughout the day. He studied ancient texts late into the night, seeking the secret technique that would finally break through his mental chaos. But the more he practiced, the worse he felt. His meditation cushion became a torture device. The meditation hall felt like a prison. The very word mindfulness made him cringe with exhaustion. Chen was experiencing what millions of spiritual seekers experience but rarely talk about. Meditation, fatigue, spiritual burnout, the crushing weight of trying to force enlightenment to happen. One morning, after a particularly brutal 4-hour meditation session where his mind had been especially chaotic, Chen reached his breaking point. He stood up from his cushion, walked outside the meditation hall, and sat under a tree in the monastery garden, not to meditate, but simply because he couldn't bear to sit formally for one more minute. For the first time in years, he wasn't trying to do anything spiritual. He wasn't following his breath, watching his thoughts, or practicing any technique. He was just sitting there, defeated and exhausted, giving up completely on the whole project of becoming enlightened. And in that moment of total surrender, something extraordinary happened. Without any effort on his part, his mind became naturally quiet, not the forced quiet of meditation practice, but the organic quiet of a lake when the wind stops blowing. Without trying to be present, he found himself completely here, aware of the birds singing, the leaves rustling, the warmth of sunlight on his face. For the first time in 15 years, Chen wasn't meditating, he was just being. And in that natural state of being, he realized something that changed everything. What he had been seeking through meditation had been there all along, waiting for him to stop seeking it. Chen sat under that tree for hours, not in formal meditation, but in simple presence. He began to understand that his years of intensive practice hadn't brought him closer to enlightenment, they had actually taken him further from it. By trying so hard to become present, he had made himself absent. By working so diligently to quiet his mind, he had created more mental noise. The realization hit him like lightning. He had been treating meditation like a job, enlightenment like a promotion he could earn through good performance. But presence isn't something you achieve, it's something you already are. Awareness isn't something you develop, it's what you're made of. All those years of struggling to watch his thoughts, Chen realized he had missed the obvious question: who was doing the watching? All those hours trying to become aware, he had overlooked the awareness that made the trying possible. When Chen returned to the monastery that evening, his fellow monks immediately noticed something different about him. There was a quality of ease in his presence, a natural stillness that hadn't been there before, not the tense stillness of meditation practice, but the relaxed stillness of someone who had stopped fighting with themselves. "What happened to you?" asked his closest friend, a monk named Wei, who had been struggling with his own meditation practice. "I stopped trying to meditate," Chen replied simply. Wei was confused. "But how can you progress spiritually without practice?" Chen looked at his friend with compassion. "Wei, have you been trying to become aware through your meditation?" "Of course," Wei answered. "That's the whole point." "Then who is it that's trying to become aware? Who is it that knows you're not aware enough? Isn't that awareness itself?" This question stopped Wei in his tracks. In all his years of practice, he had never considered this simple point. The very effort to become aware proved that awareness was already present. The one trying to meditate was the very consciousness he was seeking through meditation. Chen continued, "You've been like a fish looking for water while swimming in the ocean. The water is everywhere, but you can't see it because you're convinced you need to find it somewhere else." Wei began to understand, but his conditioning was strong. "So what should I do? Should I stop meditating like you did?" "You're still thinking about doing something," Chen replied gently. "What if you simply noticed what you're already doing? Right now, you're breathing without trying to breathe. Your heart is beating without you making it beat. Awareness is aware without you making it aware. What if enlightenment is just as natural?" This insight spread quietly through the monastery. Chen didn't preach or try to convert anyone, but his presence spoke louder than any teaching. Other monks began questioning their own approach to practice. Some, like Wei, gradually learned to hold their meditation more lightly, still sitting, still following the breath, but without the desperate grasping for results that had characterized their practice before. They discovered that meditation could be enjoyable when it wasn't a means to an end, but simply an expression of what they already were. Others found different paths. One monk discovered presence while working in the monastery garden, another while copying manuscripts, another while cooking meals for the community. They learned that the sacred wasn't confined to the meditation hall, it was wherever they brought genuine attention. But Chen's approach wasn't without its challenges. The head abbot, a traditional master who had spent 50 years advocating intensive meditation practice, was deeply concerned about this non-practicing approach. "If we don't discipline the mind through formal practice," the abbot asked Chen, "how do we prevent spiritual laziness? How do we ensure progress? How do we measure development?" Chen's response was simple but revolutionary. Perhaps the desire to measure spiritual progress is what prevents it. Perhaps the effort to discipline the mind is what keeps it agitated. Perhaps the fear of spiritual laziness is what creates spiritual tension. The abbot pondered this for days. Finally, he decided to test Chen's realization through direct experience. For 1 week, the abbot put aside his formal practice and simply lived with attention, eating breakfast with full awareness, walking the monastery grounds with presence, listening to the monks' questions with complete openness. He didn't try to be spiritual, he simply allowed himself to be human. By the end of the week, something remarkable had happened. The chronic back pain that had plagued him for years from long hours of sitting meditation had disappeared, not because he had achieved some special state, but because he had stopped creating tension through effortful practice. More importantly, he felt more genuinely peaceful than he had in decades. Not the forced peace of meditation discipline, but the natural peace of someone who had stopped fighting with themselves. The abbot's experience led to a quiet revolution in the monastery. They didn't abandon meditation entirely, but they transformed their understanding of what meditation actually was. Instead of treating it as a technique to achieve something, they began to see it as an opportunity to recognize what was already present. Some monks continued with formal sitting practice, but their relationship to it changed completely. They sat not to become enlightened, but as an expression of the enlightenment they were beginning to recognize in themselves. Others found their practice in daily activities, discovering that presence could be cultivated through any activity done with genuine attention. Chen had shown them that the goal of spiritual practice isn't to create a special state, it's to recognize the ordinariness of what we already are. Now, years later, when visitors come to the monastery seeking spiritual instruction, they often find Chen in the garden, tending vegetables with the same natural presence that had once made him famous for refusing to meditate. Master Chen, they ask, what is the secret to enlightenment? What practice should we follow? What techniques will lead us to awakening? And Chen's response is always the same. You're already awake. The question isn't how to become enlightened, it's how to stop pretending you're not. But surely, the visitors protest. We need some kind of practice, some discipline, some method. If you feel you need practice, Chen replies, then practice. But understand that you're not practicing to become something, you're practicing to remember what you are. And if you don't feel you need practice, then don't practice. But understand that you're not avoiding practice to escape something, you're recognizing what's already free. This is the ultimate teaching of the monk who refused to meditate. Whether you practice or don't practice, meditate or don't meditate, the essential point is the same. You are already what you're seeking. You've always been what you're trying to become. The enlightenment you're working toward is the awareness that's working toward enlightenment. The choice isn't between practicing and not practicing. The choice is between recognizing what you are and continuing to pretend you're something else. In the end, Chen discovered that the most profound spiritual realization isn't about achieving some special state. It's about recognizing the extraordinariness of your ordinary awareness, the sacredness of your simple presence, the enlightenment of just being exactly what you are, right here, right now. That was his gift to the world, the reminder that what we're all looking for is what's doing the looking. And perhaps that's the most radical teaching of all. You don't need to become the monk who refuses to meditate. You just need to recognize that you're already the awareness that makes all meditation and all refusing possible.